Hello everyone, welcome to this video on the capture-recapture technique, which is new to the GCSE maths this year. We're just going to work through a worked example question here so you can get a better understanding of how to approach these questions. I'm going to show you two methods. The first one would be, if you like, a non-calculator method or more of a mental technique, and the second one is the formula that exists for this type of question. So, Clive wants to estimate the number of bees in a beehive. He catches 50 of them, marks them with dye and then lets them go. The next day, and this is the most important piece of information when we start, the next day he catches 40 and of those 8 were marked with dye. So let's have a look at method 1. And this is going to be how we could work this out if it was on the non-calculator paper, although I suppose depending on the numbers you could work them out in both ways. Method 1 is 8 out of 40 bees, when he captured them again on the second day, were marked with dye. Or I could express that in a different way, 8 out of 40. Now, what I want to do is I want to turn this into a percentage. What percentage of the bees that he caught were marked with dye? Now, to turn something into a percentage, we need to turn it into out of 100. So before I do that, I'm going to cancel it down. So 8 out of 40 is the same as 4 out of 20, which is the same as 2 out of 10. And if I want to turn 2 out of 10 into a percentage, I'm going to need to times by 10 to get it out of 100. So I'm going to need to times this by 10 as well. So that's going to give me 20 out of 100, or 20%. Now, we're nearly there. What this tells us is that 20% of the bees, and remember this is an estimation, this is not exact, but this is the best that we can do in terms of our mathematical accuracy. 20% of the bees out of the sample that he caught had dye on them. Therefore, we can estimate that 20% of all of the bees in the beehive were marked with dye at the beginning. So if we can say 20% of all bees have dye on them, then we can go back to fact number 1 and look at how many of them he marked to begin with. So we can say that he marked 50 bees originally, and we're now saying that 50 bees represents 20% of all of the bees in the beehive. Therefore, 100%, i.e. all of the bees, is going to be times by 5. So let's times that by 5. So we are estimating that there were 250 bees in the beehive. So let's just recap how we did that. We said that on the recapture, 8 out of 40 had dye. So this was our sample size, the 40, and of the 40 sampled, 8 of them had dye. So we scale that up and we say 8 out of every 40 bees had dye on, and 8 out of every 40 represents 20%. So we can say 20% of all the bees in the hive have dye on them. So if he put dye on 50 bees, 50 bees was 20%, therefore all of the bees in the hive must have been 5 lots of that to make 100%, so 250 bees. The second method for capture-recapture is to use a formula. There's no reason why either of these methods is better or worse than the other one. I suppose it just depends whether you like the logic of this method or whether you'd prefer something a bit more formulaic. Although knowing the new GCSE and how many different formulae you're going to have to remember, this maybe is just another one that you're not going to be over the moon having to learn. Now, the formula is the first sample multiplied by the second sample, and then all of that's divided by those marked in the second sample. So as long as you remember the formula, you're going to be able to execute this in the exam. So let's have a look at the numbers for this question. So my first sample was 50 bees. So I'm going to have 50 multiplied by, now my second sample was 40 bees. So I'm going to have 50 multiplied by 40. And then I'm going to divide that answer by those that had marked dye on them in the second sample, which was 8. So that's going to give me 50 multiplied by 40, which is 2,000. And I'm going to divide that by 8, and that's going to give me the 250 bees that we already had as our answer for an estimation for how many were in the hive. So method 1, I suppose, needs a bit more understanding to it, but it's going to help you understand the principles of how you use this capture-recapture method. Method number 2 probably doesn't make a lot of logical sense on why this formulaic approach works, but it's a simple formula to remember, quick and easy, both ways get you to the right answer. Hope that's helped.